What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, I am very excited to talk about how to germinate finicky seeds. Now, a lot of gardeners struggle with seed starting, and a lot of times it comes down to just a few little tips and tricks that makes all the difference. So in today's episode, I'm going to share with you some tips on how to speed up germination, how to increase the germination, or even just give you little tips that might just make your life a little easier. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy. With that being said, let's get on into today's video. By far, one of the most common things that comes into our inbox is how to speed up the germination. Now, a lot of gardeners, some just are impatient, but a lot of gardeners plant seeds in the ground and they look in the back of their packet and it might give them a time for the seeds to germinate. It might be 3 to 5 days, 7 to 10 days. It could be 14 to 28 days, who knows, right? But it gives you a time window when that seed should germinate. And a lot of gardeners follow that time window as kind of a guide, and you should. However, there's certain conditions that seeds have to be exposed to so that they can germinate. It's kind of like a launch sequence on a rocket. You might have someone come on the intercom and say, boosters, check, door latched, check, seatbelts, check, right? They go through this launch sequence, and seeds need the exact same thing. And so seeds, they need things like temperature. The temperature needs to be right. The soil, the soil moisture needs to be right. The sunlight and things like that need to be right. And so there's certain things that seeds need that can make them a little more finicky. And so that can actually push back the time that it takes for the seeds to germinate. This number, 7 to 10 days, is just an average. It's under ideal conditions. Ideally, how long should it take this seed to germinate? If it goes past that, that's kind of the red flag of there's a few things that could have gone wrong. I could have gotten my moisture wrong. Maybe they rotted, or my soil is too cold. Maybe I need to warm it up. Or maybe I just have old seed and the seed germination is terrible. But it's kind of that window that tells you, all right, something's wrong. And so that's really what you want to kind of start looking at is that window. And if it goes past that window, some things that you can do to troubleshoot. The first thing you can do is the soil moisture. This is a really common problem that a lot of gardeners get wrong. And sadly, a lot of gardeners get it wrong the wrong way. A lot of gardeners fear their soil being too dry, and so they water frequently. It's actually better to underwater than it is to overwater, especially with seedlings. Because if you overwater, you can actually risk things like rot and mold, and the seeds can actually just be dead in the soil before they even had a chance to germinate. Or if they do germinate, you can go through things like dampening off, which is where the seed germinates and then keels over like it just got sawed off at the base of the plant. And that's caused from soil-borne funguses and bacterias living in the soil that like that damp soil. And so a good homework project for you to aim for is to take a damp cotton cloth. It could be a dishcloth or a shirt, anything cotton. Cotton works great for this example. And all you have to do is simply dampen it and then wring out any additional moisture. Take it and simply wring it out until every drop is gone. Don't shake it, don't try to force the drops out. Just squeeze it until every drop is done. And you should notice that the fabric is still damp. It's still, by all accounts, wet. If you take it and wipe it on a window, you should be able to see some really slight kind of foggy moisture coming from the cotton onto the window. And that's a sign that it's damp. And that feeling that you get is the right feeling for soil. A lot of gardeners wonder, well, I don't want to water my garden outside every day, so I shouldn't have to water my seedlings every day. Gardeners will sometimes flood their plants and then wait 7 to 10 days before they have to water again because their plants are so saturated with water that I don't have to water. So great, 7 to 10 days, they're plenty fine. What I'd much rather you do is water every day to every other day rather than once every 7 to 10 days. So water more frequently but less and keep that soil in that good range. How you can tell it's in that range is by one, picking it up. You should feel what a damp soil feels like. Get to know that weight. Pick it up, say, feels a little light, might need a little water. Or by the color, the surface of the soil. The surface of the soil will dry out first, But if it starts to get really light and kind of dry and blows away easily, consider dampening it down. I like a spray bottle. A spray bottle can help consistently keep that soil moist, and it doesn't just flood the seedling tray. So that's the other thing. And then also consider bottom watering. Bottom watering is great because it allows the moisture to come in from the bottom. Once the soil is damp, you can pull the trays out. Usually it takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and that helps you to make sure that they're not overwatering, because any excess water you can dump out. The second thing that comes with the time for the seeds to germinate that can actually extend it is the temperature of the soil. You want to keep your soil warm. It doesn't have to be hot, but cold soil will actually, the seeds will take a lot longer for this, it'll take a lot longer for the seeds to germinate if your soil is cold. So if it's in like a basement or like an accessory room that you don't have heated that much, you want to consider maybe getting a heat mat. The only thing is once you have a heat mat, turn the heat mat off once the seeds germinate. Seeds do like a window of about 70 to 85 degrees for the seeds to germinate well. After that, the seeds can tolerate cool soil. The next thing to consider with germinating finicky seed is how old is the seed? A lot of gardeners want to keep seed around forever, and seed does germinate for a very long time if you keep it cool, dark, and dry. However, if the seed is old, you want to consider maybe either adding more seed to the germination trays or getting fresh seed. The older the seed, the longer it'll take to germinate. Fresh seed, under ideal conditions, might take 7 to 10 days. But if you take seeds that are, say, 4 to 5 years old, they might take double that, believe it or not. And so older seed will take longer to germinate. And so that leads me to the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is increasing the germination rate. When you start a flat of seeds, you want to have consistent germination so that you're not wasting precious resources. Your lights, your soil, your containers, even your time is all very precious, and you don't want to waste it. And so a lot of gardeners find it frustrating when they go to start seeds and find that their seeds are not germinating as well as they should. And so with germination rate, soil moisture plays a big role into germination rate. Too much moisture affects the germination because you're going to have dampening off. Also, old seed affects germination rate. The older the seed, the lower the germination rate. Also, you have things like wild and domesticated, wild versus domesticated. And with wild seed, you're actually going to have a lower germination rate than you will with domesticated. Take the tomato, for example. If you take a wild variety of tomato, one that has to survive, the fittest have to survive. Every seed can't just germinate, because then you might have competition amongst siblings, and those siblings might not be, one of those siblings might not be the strongest, and the whole goal of the tomato is to reproduce, to create more seed for the future. Whereas domesticated seed, the seed over time has been very used to us saving the seed and then cultivating the seed in ideal conditions. And so the germination rate actually is far better for things like a domesticated tomato or like a domesticated herb or anything like that. Whereas if you take a wild seed, the germination rate is actually much lower. And then aside from all those things, you have external factors. These are factors that actually help the seed germinate, but are external of like the soil. Things that you need to do to the seeds to help them germinate. This can affect the germination rate because, take lavender for example. If you just throw lavender seed in the ground, you're going to have like 3 to 5% germination. Pitifully low germination. But if you cold stratify, that's the process of taking the seed, throwing it in the fridge on a damp paper towel. We have videos on it. Throw it in the fridge on a damp paper towel for like 2 to 5 weeks, pull it out and then plant it. You're going to see 80 to 85% germination. Or take a seed like a date seed, right? A date palm. You need to scarify that seed. There's other vegetables and herbs and stuff that need to be scarified. I recommend doing a Google search because I can't give you all the varieties that need to be cold stratified or scarified and things like that. But this is the process of taking a abrasive material like a nail file or sandpaper, and then scratching that seed surface so they can germinate better. This is because in the wild, these seeds are used to be chewed by animals, and the chewing process will actually scuff them up, but not fully digest the seed, so that when the seed is then passed through the digestive system, those little scratches actually help the seed to germinate. And so it's absolutely incredible how nature has worked. And if you're trying to start some of these seeds that need to be cold stratified or scarified, and you don't do that, the germination rate is really, really low. And so these external things that you can do can greatly improve the germination rate. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about is soaking. Soaking is a process of kind of an external thing you can do. It's not always required, but it's recommended if you have something like corn or beans, there's other seeds as well, that like to be soaked. You can actually soak your seeds for 12 to 24, even 48 hours in some cases, and soaking the seeds will help to jumpstart the germination process so that when you plant your seeds, they don't have as much time in the soil. Because some seeds like corn and beans are prone to fungus and rot and things that can actually consume the seed, which lowers the germination rate. And that can actually make a seed kind of finicky because you might plant 100 seeds under great conditions, and because they take 7 to 12 days for the seeds to germinate, that's just enough time for an insect or a bacteria or anything like that, or even a bird, to come and eat those seeds, or a mouse or something like that. So the faster you can get it in the ground and sprouting, the better. And so soaking a seed can really help with that. It's not required, but it can certainly help to increase the germination rate because you're going to jumpstart that process and then plant it, and then it's up and growing much faster. Now, the final thing that I wanted to touch on with finicky seeds is the use of things like vermiculite and sand. You can use vermiculite and sand on literally any seed if you're having a hard time keeping the soil damp. Particularly seeds that are planted close to the surface, things like celery, some of your herbs like chamomile, very, very teeny tiny seeds, some of your flower seeds and whatnot. If they're very super close to the surface of the soil can dry out much faster, and that sporadic dry and then wet and then dry and then wet can really lower the germination rate and the overall success of the seed. And so by covering the soil with some sand, some coarse playground sand is fine, or vermiculite, I prefer vermiculite. It holds on to moisture a little bit better than the soil does. And because it holds on to moisture just a little bit better, it helps reduce that margin of error. It helps to actually be a little bit more forgiving. And you can do this with things like tomatoes, peppers. There is no seed that requires vermiculite to germinate. Some just do better with the addition of it. And so you can sprinkle a small amount of it, no more than 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch or so, over the top of your seedling trays, and that really helps to increase germination. Now, the final thing I wanted to mention is planting depth. Planting depth can be a huge contributing factor to a seed not germinating. It can also contribute a huge fact of how long it takes the seed to actually germinate in the first place, as well as seeds having poor germination. If you plant your seeds too deep, planting them too deep can be detrimental because sometimes the plant will germinate and not have enough energy to actually pop out through the soil. By the time that happens, sometimes the seed is so tired that it just ends up dying right in the soil. And you think, well, my seed never germinated. Well, it did. It just was planted too deep. So what I like to do as a general rule of thumb is I take whatever seed I'm starting and I don't go any deeper than about 3/4 of the way up my pinky fingernail. I'll poke my pinky in there, make just a little divot. That's all it takes. You don't need to bury the seed like inches deep. That's way too deep. Now, if you're trying to grow things like pumpkins or squash and corn and beans, the big seeds, those can go about double that. They can go about 1/2 inch or so, but you still don't need to be burying them super deep. The deeper you go, the more energy they take to germinate, and the longer they can take to germinate, as well as the higher the probability of something going wrong. So just keep them shallow, water more frequently, and you're gonna be fine. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to throw a like up there, subscribe if you're not yet already, and I gotta get back to planting these seeds because I got a lot to start. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully y'all learned something new. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home. We'll catch y'all later. Bye.